Chair, Vice Chair, and Ranking will have a planning session. We'll meet in here at 9 o'clock, and hopefully staff can attend. I apologize for that. We'll probably will have to work Monday. I won't work bills on Monday, but we'll probably have to have a hearing because I messed up. Got caught up in my doctor's appointments, just forgot to talk to Florence and get things changed around on the agenda. Committee, I wanted to get a presentation. We haven't had one in the committee a while on load securement and weight enforcement. And so figured we'd get one going on for today. They brought the experts in with us, so I don't know who's up first, but we'll turn it over to Captain LaRoe.
LaRoe, I'm a captain of the Kansas Highway Patrol. I'm in charge of the Commercial Motor Vehicle Enforcement Program. Just kind of a quick overview of our section of the agency is that I have 67 inspectors assigned to our unit. They check trucks full time. 14 of those are mobile inspectors. They have mobile scales. We talked about that in committee last time I was in here. One of the things we came to talk about specifically this morning was load securement and weight violations. A couple highlights just for the year in 2024 when it comes to load securement. We had, in my unit alone, 3,661 violations issued for load securement, so it is an issue. It is a safety issue. I'm going to have one of my troopers talk about that here shortly. Out of that 3,000 violations, 1,000, a little over 1,000 of them were bad enough that those trucks had to be placed out of service until those problems could be rectified. So it is a big, serious safety concern for us. That's why we're out there on our mission with the Highway Patrol. The second part of this is size and weight. When it comes to size and weight, we had a brief kind of description of it last time I was in here as well. Last year, we had 61 violations for overweight by registration, 645 for overweight by axle, and we'll explain these a little bit here later, and overweight by bridge, 177, and overweight on the interstate, even though they're not supposed to be there again, is 950, and 2,145 warnings for weight. I kind of threw a lot of numbers at you. I think the big takeaway here, committee, is that the inspectors are very busy. We're going to articulate and show some of the violations that we do see roadside and what our concerns are and why we do the mission that we do. Today, this morning, I brought with me Technical Trooper Nick Wright. Nick Wright is a master instructor for commercial motor vehicles. He's been nationally recognized as an instructor, has a lot of awards, so happy to have him. He's also about 21 years, maybe more, of experience with the Kansas Highway Patrol. The other individual is Motor Carrier Inspector Tyson Oxford. Tyson's also about 21 years of experience in this field as well. Tyson Oxford works in our size and weight specifically. And with that, I'm going to turn this presentation over that we have for you. It's a PowerPoint. I'm going to turn it over to Nick Wright to discuss load securement.
Well, thank you again. My name is Nick Wright, trooper with the Kansas Highway Patrol. And this is going to be, there's a kind of a trendy term now of a 30,000-foot view. This is probably going to be more like a 130,000-foot view. Just for context, last week we were teaching cargo securement, and I spent about 6 hours teaching just cargo securement. So don't worry, we're not going to hold you past lunch. This won't be 6 hours worth. So very, very overview, but this is kind of the key points. If I was going to talk to somebody in a coffee shop real quickly about what cargo securement is, this is kind of what we do with it. So make sure I've got the right button going here. This should not be, there we go, right there. Nope. Not the laser one. Are we on? Yeah. There we go. Perfect. I think, well, maybe. Go ahead and give that a go. Power. There we go. All right. Okay, thank you. So, as Captain LaRoe said, these are courses that we teach all across the country, so that's why he mentioned I'm a national instructor. That's what that means. So teach right here in our own backyard in Salina, where our academy is, but also all across the country so that we're consistent across all inspections, no matter what state you get inspected in. So why do we do these things? Well, we want to ensure safe transportation on our highways, and that would include our city streets as well. We want to avoid collisions involving cargo securement. We've probably all received a chipped windshield in the past, or broken windshield, or damage. Those things get expensive, so we want to protect property, and of course, we want to protect lives. Sadly, there's lots of examples over the years of people getting killed as a result of cargo coming loose. I just heard one the other day, actually, as a matter of fact, a big piece of metal came through somebody's windshield and killed them. So that's what we want to do. Here's just a couple of examples, things that are not uncommon to see. You can see big slabs of concrete sticking out the back of a truck there. You can see things that go through people's windshields. We even had our own troopers. One of my former coworkers had I think it was a hammer go through the windshield of his patrol car one day. So these things are extremely dangerous when things aren't secured properly on motor vehicles, no matter where it is, whether it's a big truck like this, pipes, things like that. We had one a while back that something came through and it was actually a brake drum. And granted, that's not cargo, but a brake drum who came through the windshield and hit the driver in the chest. Fortunately, he was not hurt in that incident. So we're going to start with our Kansas statutes annotated, and 8-1906 is where we find our cargo securement. Now, this applies to all vehicles, not just regulated commercial motor vehicles, but also just in your own personal pickup truck driving down the road. And generally speaking, the simplest way to think of it is make sure it's secured so it doesn't fall off of your vehicle. Specifically in the statute, it uses the words dropping, sifting, leaking, or otherwise escaping, whether that's sand that's blowing out, gravel, or it's something that's completely unsecured, like a big box or crate of something on the vehicle. There are some exceptions, as with most statutes and federal regulations. A lot of times there's exceptions to these rules for certain industries and things of that nature. So one of those is spreading substances on the highway. We just came out of that season here for the last couple months, and we hope we're done with that. But spreading salt, sand, of course, those vehicles have to be able to drop things onto the highway so that we can get where we're going. I'm always curious as to why that exception is in there, if someone wrote a ticket for a KDOT truck spreading salt, or maybe that was just for kind of a pre-strike there. So there's also things, being an agricultural state, there was an exception added in there a few years back. Time gets away from me now, but it's been probably a good 4 years, I think, where agricultural forage commodities, when they're intra-state, meaning they're hauled only within Kansas, from a place of production to market, those things do not have to be secured. So I'll give you a picture of what one of those looks like. There's our salt spreaders, of course, and then that's one of those silage trucks. I think that's actually the very truck that was used in the presentation when that was added into the statute a few years back. So those things, because they're going short distances, it's not something like rock and gravel. It's real lightweight, almost like grass clippings in a sense. Those things don't have to be secured. There's also some exceptions added. It's either 2 or maybe coming up on 3 years now for cotton bales. So again, this is for intra-state only in our state statute. And so the cotton bales have some exception. They do have some specific rules within that statute. So there are specifically designed vehicles for this, trailers. These bales weigh about 6,000 pounds, so they are heavy. So these bales have to be loaded in a single layer, front to back on the trailer. These trailers have to be equipped with cradles at the front and back of these trailers, and then they also have to have side stakes, side boards of some sort that's at least 12 inches high, and there's not a specific type of material. Most of them are like a steel, kind of a T-post looking thing that holds these things in. And here's some pictures of those, what those might look like. Pretty common thing that we see out in southwest Kansas, Pratt, and on out there. There's quite a bit of that. Starting about October, we start seeing those. So that's a recent change to our state law. Now for our interstate regulated motor carriers, those are going to fall under our federal regulations, under Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So these are going to be your interstate carriers, in other words, those that are crossing state lines, or the first leg of an interstate movement, so leaving the state, or international commerce, but there's also some intrastate carriers as well. We do allow some exceptions to the intrastate motor carriers, for example, some vehicles that are less than 26,001 pounds. A lot of times those are accepted out with a specific set of criteria. Just for a quick little understanding of what a commercial motor vehicle is. By federal definition, it has to fall under one of these 4 things. The first is the most common that we see, which is a gross vehicle weight rating or an actual weight of 10,001 pounds or more. So whether that's just a truck itself that's over 10,000 pounds, or it's a truck and trailer, when you add those together and you get over, well, 10,001 or more, that becomes a regulated commercial motor vehicle when they're in commerce. Now, we're not regulating when you're just taking your pickup down the road to pick something up and it's not for commerce. This is just those companies and businesses, people who are trying to make money, those sort of things. The second definition would be a vehicle that's designed or used to transport 8 or more people, including the driver. That would be like a limousine service when they're for compensation. The third definition would be very similar, but now we're at more than 15 passengers, including the driver, and that would be when it's not for compensation. So think like a church shuttle bus. They're not receiving any money. Maybe they're shuttling their members of the church between different parking lots. Maybe they're taking a trip, but there's no money exchange there. So they actually are a regulated motor carrier. And then the last one is any size vehicle that requires hazmat placards. So if I take a motorcycle and I put a stick of dynamite on it and I'm in commerce, that is now considered a regulated commercial motor vehicle. So that's the only 4 things that get a vehicle into being regulated under these cargo securement guidelines, among a lot of other regulations. So this is kind of some pictures just to kind of help you wrap your mind around that. Your typical truck, tractor, semi-trailer on the top left, your limousine, shuttle bus on the bottom left, and then that pickup truck is probably under 10,000 pounds, but once you put a quantity of hazmat that requires placards, now that's a regulated commercial motor vehicle, which means they fall under a whole bunch of regulations. So generally speaking, what do they need to do then if they're a regulated commercial motor vehicle for cargo securement? Well, our wording in the regulation is a little bit different than our Kansas statute. This one talks about leaking, spilling, blowing, or falling. So everything has to be secured to make sure it doesn't do one of those things. It also has to be loaded so that the stability and the maneuverability of the vehicle is not adversely affected. In other words, they go around a cloverleaf, and because everything is on one side of the vehicle, it overturns the vehicle, and then clearly it wasn't loaded in a proper way. They can use walls. If you think about like your typical Walmart type trailer that has 4 walls, they put the pallets of groceries in there, then they don't have to strap every one of those pallets down because it's going to be retained within the 4 walls. The securement devices themselves, if it's on an open flatbed, for example, whether it's chains or synthetic webbing straps, they have to be free of damage that would affect their performance. Well, what does that mean? Well, we have a whole table that tells us when a device is no longer considered effective. That could be knots in the tie down, unauthorized repairs, like trying to use roofing nails to repair a nylon strap. That's not going to work. Bent chains, broken chains, things of that nature. The cargo also has to be secured for the weight of the cargo. Now, we require a requirement, the federal regulations do, that you have to secure for at least half of the weight of the cargo. And we use some numbers based on the types of securement devices they're using, chains and synthetic webbing, to add up to that. So, for example, if I've got an excavator that weighs 50,000 pounds, then I have to have enough securement devices based on their working load limit to cover 25,000 pounds. In addition to the weight, they also have to cover, they also have to cover for the length of the cargo. So depending on how long it is, basically about every 10 feet, they need to have securement devices. There's also several, about 15 to 20 rules that are called commodity specific. Those are things like dressed lumber, intermodal containers, heavy equipment, cars, concrete pipe, things like that. They have very specific rules for that type of cargo that is outside just kind of your generic. So here's a couple of pictures for you on that. Intermodal containers, large boulders over 11,000 pounds have special rules. Of course, for obvious reasons, they have to use chains on those. They can't use nylon straps, things like that. Heavy equipment, we want those things to be secured and, of course, lowered. All those accessory equipment, like if they have buckets and things like that. Several years ago, back in about 2007, we had one hit the bridge out by Hayes. In between the 2 Hayes exits, closed that bridge down for a long time. That piece of equipment had basically worked itself up through the hydraulics because it wasn't secured and cut halfway through the bridge. So that obviously affects all of us who are tax-paying citizens when we have to repair bridges and things like that. Automobiles, dressed lumber, whether it's on a flatbed wrecker like that or if it's on a car hauler, those have certain rules to make sure that those cars are secured in a specific manner. So with that, that's kind of your really quick overview of what cargo securement is so that we can hopefully protect people's lives, of course, and also their property and keep our infrastructure in place as well. Like hitting bridges is not a good day for any of us. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. More of curiosity, are there differences on like ag for hauling hay bales? Like you got them big hay bales you often don't see secured, they're just carried by the weight? Or
that's a good question. So there in 8-1906, there is that exception for cotton bales, but it specifically says that exception does not apply to hay bales. So hay bales are still supposed to be secured. Now, there are some other methods that have been tested on square bales back in, I want to say around 2007, 2008, The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, along with the California Highway Patrol, did some testing where they actually picked trucks up that were loaded with square bales, tipped them over, did all sorts of things to kind of see how they worked. But those are only for square bales. Now, for the round bales, though, we do find a lot of those that are not secured, and they fall, if they're an intrastate farmer, for example, they're just under our state statute, so they do need to be secured for that. So there are some special rules for that. Yes, sir.
Like our lawn mowing services, our for-hire folks are underneath, because they have to secure all their equipment and stuff down properly, right?
That is correct. Anybody who's a regulated motor carrier, whether they're a private carrier hauling their own things or they're a for-hire hauling somebody else's, they have to fall under those federal regulations.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Committee, questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyson Oxford to talk about size and weight.
Good morning. Again, I'm Tyson Oxford, and I deal largely with size and weights of not just commercial motor vehicles, but all types of vehicles, both commercial and non-commercial. A couple of reasons why we do weight enforcement. One, we want to preserve the roadways in the state of Kansas, and also it is attributable to safety. They do run hand in hand. An overweight vehicle creates an unsafe condition, just like a vehicle that's not properly has its cargo secured. We are interested in doing both of those two functions to protect property and lives. Yes, I apologize. It's in the same one. While he's bringing that up, I'll go ahead and talk briefly about what those size and weight limitations are. For a wheel end, we can't exceed 10,000 pounds per wheel end. And that would include a dual wheel end, so two wheels on the same side of the vehicle, same axle. This isn't working, sir. And on a single axle, it's 20,000 pounds. Thank you. There are a few exceptions to size and weight, but I kind of liken it to speeding. Not too many vehicles are exempt the speed limit, same with size and weight. Very few are, well, at least weight anyway, are exempt. Obviously, fighting vehicles, which they have their own section, so they have their own weight laws. But we're not going to be stopping our public safety personnel in the course of their duties to do this. County and state vehicles are exempt by Attorney General's opinions, and then implements of husbandry, so like farm tractors and such. Again, 10,000 pounds on a single wheel, and that, like I said, that includes a dual wheel and dual configuration on one of the vehicle. 20,000 pounds on a single axle. 34,000 pound on tandem. Now, a tandem axle is two or more axles spaced 40 to 96 inches apart, which is, I got a picture up here that kind of will paint a better picture. For triples, we're at 42 to 44,000 pounds, and that's three or more axles from 96 to 132 inches in distance. And the main takeaway from that is three or more. So we could actually have four axles in that configuration, but we're still limited to the definition of triples because it falls within those parameters, 96 to 132 inches. And then quads is 50,000 pounds, and quads are 120 inches to 150 inches in length. And we're usually measuring center hub to center hub on those. 80,000 pounds on the interstate. When we do enforce size and weight on triples, quads, we use the bridge chart. The bridge chart is depends largely on how many axles the vehicle has and the distance between those axles. And basically what we're trying to do is limit the amount of weight in one focused area on the roadway. Kansas highways and U.S. highways, we allow 85.5 on those secondary roadways, provided they can axle it. We do, well, the state offers oversized permits or overweight permits I like to think of these permits as by necessity, not convenience, and this is what I instruct carriers and people who are, yes, provided they can axle it. But typically, these permits you see with large, heavy equipment, you can't apply for a permit and obtain a permit if you're hauling rock or aggregate material, unless it's an ag permit, which allows you to go to the 90,000 pounds, provided you can axle it and you're registered for the maximum weight limits. So again, on a single axle up front, you can have 20,000 pounds and 34,000 pounds on tandems because those axles are spread 40 to 96 inches apart, no more than that. On a truck like this, typically you could have a gross weight of 54,000 pounds, but again, we would have to measure from the first axle to the last axle to ensure that by length, we could haul that much. And there is a chart in 81909 that governs how much you can have on those axles at that distance. Triples, again, we'll use the chart to determine the distance between the first and last axle in that configuration. And that usually generally falls from 42 to 44,000 pounds, because once we get outside those weight limits, we're spread too far apart to be defined as a triple axle. And then quads, 50,000 pounds. This is what we normally see running up and down the roadway. We have two sets of tandems, the truck, the trailer, and then a steering axle that is a single axle. So in theory, 20,000 pounds on the single, 34,000 pounds on the truck, and 34,000 pounds on the trailer adds up to more than 80,000 pounds, but on the interstate system, we are still restricted to 80,000 pounds. Typically, in a setup like this, the driver would be unable to get 20,000 pounds on the steering axle just by nature of design of the truck, tractor, semi-trailer. Typically, we see 12.3 and less. And again, that varies on the type of vehicle, but for this illustration, I would say that truck would probably be closer to 12,000 on the steer, 34, which gets us to that 80,000. To enforce size and weight, we use, in my opinion, the best scale ever made, and that's the Haney wheel load weigher. It's specifically designed for that, and their definition of that is the fast determination of wheel ends, including axle weights and gross weights of vehicles. I won't bore you with the mechanics of the scale, but I would love to. And we also use fixed facilities. These fixed facilities are certified. These scales are certified. And I'm going off of memory here, but don't quote me. I do believe they have to be certified to a tolerance of 1%, which is it allows them to go in 20-pound increments at those fixed facilities. On our scales, roadside, in the previous slide, those go in 50-pound, what we call divisions, or 50-pound increments. I know that was kind of a brief overview on size and weight, but do you have any questions concerning size and weight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Probably a curiosity question again, but on page 11, where you have on the back of the semi 34,000, is that per axle? Is that dual? Is that total? Then it'd be total, right?
So it's actually a really good question. So 34,000 is for a dual or tandem axle is what it's referred to as a tandem axle. So two or more axles that fall within 40 to 96 inches in distance. Within that tandem axle, we also have two single axles that we can't exceed 20,000 pounds on either one. Now, in theory, we would want that divvied up 17 and 17 to arrive to 34,000, but there's nothing that says you can't have 20 and 14 for 34. Just as long as we don't exceed 34 for the grouping or 20 for the single. And that's applicable across the triples and the quads as well. Can't have more than 20 on any one of those axles, 34 on any two, or whatever the bridge chart says for 3.
Okay, and just maybe one follow-up.
Yes.
So you see semi-trailers and trucks now, they sometimes have those one huge tire instead of like double. Is it the same or do they haul less?
No, it is the same. It is the same, yeah. There is a tire weight rating that cannot be exceeded, but that's by federal regulation, so. But 10,000 is 10,000 per wheel, whether you got 1 or 2 in configuration.
So would those be as safe as having dualies if it blew out or not?
A lot of I'm kind of making a couple of assumptions, but do I think they're more safe? I don't really have the knowledge to say one way or the other. I could tell you my opinion. My opinion is I don't think they're as safe just because I think it affects the stability of the vehicle. They don't handle as well. And again, if you blow out a tire, you're done. I mean, whether it's in dual configuration or a single tire, that is an out-of-service condition. And you'd be done right there. But as far as whether it's safer than dual configuration, a lot of them are doing it because it reduces the weight, and the lower their tare weight is, the more cargo they can haul.
Okay, yeah, that, I didn't realize that that's why they did it. I was wondering that. Thank you.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here. Thanks for your service. Question, how much of it, whether we're talking about cargo securement or weight enforcement, how much of this is whether you are inspecting everybody kind of either at a checkpoint or at a road stop or otherwise, versus how much of it is you're just kind of looking for folks who you think may be in violation of either the cargo securement or the weight enforcement. So that's kind of help me get a better understanding of that, of how stuff is how these laws are enforced, whether it's, again, just kind of eyeballing it, like it looks like I need to pull that person over, there may be a violation, or, hey, we're just going to stop everybody and do a check for weight and securement. So thank you.
Yes, sir. To answer the question as far as like size and weight enforcement, because they're two different practices really, whether you're selecting a vehicle for inspection or whether you're selecting a vehicle for inspection of size and weight, specifically. I use a number of things. Training and experience for one, which we've all heard, what the tires look like, what's the cargo look like, and to kind of join these two programs that we kind of presented here today together, losing cargo because there's too much is a good indicator that the vehicle might be overweight. And a lot of it is just experience. If for an inspection purposes, maybe those are selected more at a random basis, but that varies per inspector.
No, that's helpful, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Notice like down at some of those weight stations, you have these pre-pass for certain vehicles. Could you give a little explanation on that?
Sir, do you want to take that question or you want me to? Okay.
Thank you, Senator. That's a good question. The weigh stations, the fixed stations that we had a picture of at the end, there is a pre-pass system. We have 2 companies in Kansas. One's DriveWise, one's called Pre-Pass. Pre-Pass is kind of the Nike. That's the one you hear about the most. What that does is a truck goes underneath a transponder, and I'm not a real tech guy, but I'm just going to let you know that data gets transferred up to the weigh station. And what happens is if that company has a good safety rating, a good ISS score, doesn't have a lot of violations, doesn't have any crashes, they're allowed to bypass the system. What that does is allows us to let good carriers, so that we're not just picking up people, lets the good carriers that have good safety ratings bypass scales at certain times, but that's based on a percentage. If I'm one company, I send 10 trucks through, probably one of mine's going to get flagged in, but the other 9 won't be allowed to go. And again, that's based off my safety rating and my inspection history and things like that. So we do allow trucks to continue. We save a lot of congestion at the scales that way. We make sure that we're not trying to target or enforce on people that maybe don't need to be looked at as much as others. I think the big thing when it comes to a program like ours, when it comes to inspections, to answer your question, Senator, We do have areas of complaints where people will say, hey, our roads are getting tore up. We may do a check lane in that area, and we'll do a bunch of size and weight enforcement, do a bunch of weight enforcement based off that complaint, in which case a lot of trucks going through will get stopped. Typically speaking, on a normal day, the inspectors will go out and do their jobs. They know what to look for. Again, if the wheels are if the weight is so heavy, the wheels are touching and bulging, they know what to look for. Hey, it's probably something to go take a look at. If the car goes spilling off, whether it's rock or whatever, that's another issue that's probably up above the back of the truck. That's something that I probably want to go take a look at, might want to weigh. So they use a lot of their training and a lot of their own history to determine which trucks to stop. But to answer your question again, we may have a complaint where we may go do a pretty heavy enforcement to see what's going on in that area, and that's based off complaints.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your presentation and for being here and for your service to our state. It was mentioned a few minutes ago about tire blowouts, and I would think that that would be a serious hazard for our travelers on our roads. Is there anything that you do in the inspection process to prevent that? Is there checking the tread, the inflation, if it's bulging? Is that part of it, or have you determined what causes all those blowouts? Because I think we've all seen, the tread of the tires strewn all over the highways. So
That's a very good question, Senator. Basically, during an inspection process, we are going to check tread depth, make sure that it's in the proper adjustment. There are some regulations on that. It has to be checked in a couple different tread grooves, things like that. We're also going to check that they mentioned earlier the tire weight rating. So what that means is on the side of that tire, it says, and I'm just going to throw a number out, it can't hold more than 5,000 pounds on that tire. That doesn't mean I can't put more cargo on top of it. It just means that tire can't hold more than that. And if I do that, I'm going to run the risk of a blowout or shredding that tire. So when they say tire weight rating, we're talking about axles, but we're also talking about the actual tire itself. That determination is made by the manufacturers and by the feds on what that rating is. When they do check tires, they're going to check the air pressure. They can't be less than 50% of the cold tire pressure rating that's on the side, so they'll just stick a tire gauge on there as well. Make sure it's inflated properly, because if it's underinflated, also a risk of blowing that tire out. Trying to think, they'll check flat spots on tires during the inspection process as well, but they do look at each individual tire on the truck when we do get it stopped roadside or at a scale facility.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have with the stuff that's on the side of the roads, on blowouts, is that more of a retread issue, or is that a blowout issue from because a lot of the straight trucks and others, there's a lot of utilization of the retread process. So just, you want to give a little fun fact there?
Yes, sir. So you bring up a good point. Retreads are allowed on certain portions of the combination of the truck and trailer. That's a cost-saving benefit to somebody to allow their tires to run a little bit longer. Typically speaking, though, Senator, when we run to blowouts, we're talking old deteriorated tires that are kind of rotted, they're over their tire weight rating, or they're under pressurized. Those are the big issues that we usually run into. Do the retreads come off, the caps come off? Yes, absolutely.
Road gators, everybody's favorite item.
Not so much, Senator, but we deal with them often, so.
You have memorandums of understanding with some cities to help out with enforcement and inspection of vehicles?
Yes, Senator, we do, specifically up in the northeast Kansas portion. When I started talking earlier, I said that my unit had 64 inspectors. Those are assigned to Troop I in the Kansas Highway Patrol. We do have some inspectors that work for municipalities, Olathe, Overland Park, Johnson County Sheriff's Office, just to name a few. There's not many. I'd say about less than a dozen total between those organizations, but they do their own enforcement in their own cities. We train them through our program. They're trained just like our troopers are. They're held to the same standard that we are, but they do it inside their city limits. Typically speaking, my personnel are assigned to the highways and the interstate system. But if Olathe wants to deal with some of the issues they're having in their city, they can do that. They sign on with a memorandum with us. We train their personnel. They have to recertify with us every year as well. To that point, Senator, I'd also like to add that we do a little bit of gatekeeping when it comes to that program, and it's for good reason. We don't want those things to go out and get abused. It is for commercial motor vehicle enforcement. It's not meant for drug interdiction and things like that. We are here to check trucks, and we make sure that that's their program goal as well.
Committee for the questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Committee, once again, we will not meet tomorrow. We're going to have a planning meeting in here. I do apologize for not putting anything on the agenda tomorrow. We will meet Monday. We will not be working bills on Monday, so if you want to come on WebEx, it'll just be a hearing. Any further business to come before the committee? Not, we're adjourned.